meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Mr. Ruiz.
Here.
Mrs. Geiger.
Here.
Mrs. Edwards. Here. Mr. Benson.
Here.
Ms. Vedder.
Here.
We're just going to go through a couple of the committee reports prior to the budget discussion so they can get back to work. Grants, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. Just briefly, we are presently working with the county clerk's office and the DA's office to develop the local government records management improvement project proposal submission in response to the anticipated RFP released by the New York State Education State Archives Office. The project will involve the imaging and subsequent shredding of certain case files as part of the overall effort to improve access to the files via electronic means and to free up space up in the courthouse. We are working continuously with the ACC and DPW and Audit and others on the administration of the Hill Phase 21 grant, with the goal being to ensure project completion and claiming submitted prior to the 12/31/13 deadline date. We've been praised by DOH staff in the oversight and timely submission of requested information related to the project, so we're all very proud of that.
Yay.
Yay, thank you. DPEM, or I guess Division of Planning Community Development, I'm not sure what they're called now. We've been working with them and Audit concerning the review of draws on the Micro Enterprise Assistance Program and the New York Main Street programs, and working with the Planning Division and the County Attorney's Office in closing out of the CDBG Housing Rehab Grant. All the Office of Emergency Management and all the third quarter reporting on the Homeland Security Office of Emergency Grants have been completed on time, for which we have been consistent in meeting these deadlines. We have also been attending the regularly recurring radio interoperability project meetings. New York State Grants Gateway is rolling out. We are starting to establish meeting dates with division and department heads to discuss the system and to obtain managed user information for the system setup. We have been in contact with staff at the Grants Reform Office of the State Division of Budget. The state is focusing on not-for-profits and vendors first, then county governments. State contacts advises that we are in good shape and ahead of many other counties, as some have yet to even submit the delegated administrator registration forms. So we will be working with the state contact and setting up our county in the system. Lastly, I'm pleased to report that the Grants Administration Manual, our first version, will be routed this morning to our acting county manager and to Annie for distribution to the legislators. The manual describes how our department can assist county government departments in seeking, applying for, and administering grants. Two parts to the manual. First is policy and procedure, and the second is information on preparing a winning grant proposal. So given the manual is a working document, which may be amended from time to time, we welcome your feedback and your thoughts on it. And that's pretty much what I have. There's other stuff going on, but.
Manual since April, waiting for feedback from us.
I think so. What we've taken, what we've talked about, incorporated it, so I think that everybody will be pleased with it. It's not overly large, so.
Thanks for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
No problem, thank you.
Angela?
Just been, I'm not gonna go through the stats to save some time, and we have a lot going on, but still very busy trying to work with the grants administration to get these closeouts done. Still a lot of corrections being made prior to it being able to be signed off and brought down, so very time consuming in these correction stages. And getting ready for year end, 1099s, all prepping, trying to get departments to submit their vouchers timely so we can kind of get as much paid before year end, so we have a better look at our budget. Very busy with some contract issues, but other than that, pretty much the norm, and I don't want to take much more of your time. If anybody needs anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Angela. Ira, you want to just go over your numbers quick?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're still up, we got a sales tax payment a couple of days ago. We're still up for the year, $33,539. But that second payment in November was down about $50,000. We had been up almost, close to $90,000. So, it looks like it's trending about, be the same as be about even with last year by the time we're done, is what it looks to me. The mortgage tax is up. It's been up all year. The room tax, on the other hand, has been a little behind all year and continues to be, although a week or so ago, because of the nature of the contract between the county and the Visitors Association, we had to calculate a payment based on estimates. Josh and Angela and I talked, looked at some numbers, and it appears that they're probably as well gonna break even with what they had last year, even though they're behind right now, so that's our
Edward's out.
best estimate. We've got some bond payments in November, not too many, about 300,000, and then I listed here, we always pay retirement. As long as I've been here, we've been paying the retirement to the state at the end of January. But we actually have the option of paying it at the end of December, we just never have the ability to do it.
What'd be the benefit,
We
anything?
don't, well, you can see it's about $100,000. But we listed it in case we do have that option, as a practical matter next month. But that's what it is.
You could save 100,000.
Need to find someone.
Of course, that number when I started was about half, more than half of what it is now.
So we save
Edward's back in.
100,000 if we do this in December.
Do you have an extra $100,000 in your budget, Mr. Sullivan?
I might find it.
No, I'm sure, okay.
I don't have 11, but I don't have 11 million.
Don't have 11 million in the bank.
It's a good thing we had that reserve fund policy put in place that you put in, when was that?
Yeah. We did that earlier this year.
So we have 13 million in there.
Oh, you talking about what we used to refer to as the landfill closure account?
The
Talking about
one-
the fund balance, the policy, fund balance policy,
The policy.
that's 7 million.
7 million.
Right.
Plus the other 6 million. So thanks for that.
Well, I think you guys had a reasonable discussion about it and adopted it, so thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the resolutions real quick. First one's to modify the county budget, moved by
Motion.
Jean, second.
I just had a question.
Cindy, you seconding that?
Oh, yeah, I can do that
Okay.
too.
Otherwise you can't discuss it.
I'm one of 9.
But we need a second.
No, just looking at the state and federal, revenue decrease, that's 985. What happened there? Page 6. Cause then it came out of contract construction, on page,
It was just something
5.
DPW had anticipating completing, a fully funded project, but due to staffing and time constraints, they didn't get to it, so it's gonna probably, I think it's something that's now included in the budget for next year.
What line are you on, Cindy? Sorry.
page 6. It's the state aid, state and federal aid, transport, disaster, road and bridge, 985, revenue decrease.
Yeah, it was a project or projects they'd anticipated completing in 13 with state and federal money that they didn't have time to get to this year, so they're just reducing the revenue and expense, and I think it's something they're anticipating.
They anticipated the aid and the aid.
And the cost, but they didn't, it's a project they didn't get to complete this year, so they're gonna, I'm pretty sure they've rolled it and now included it in their budget for 14. There's no impact on the budget, just they're reducing the dollar for dollar expenses and revenues.
There's not gonna be an increased county share as a result of that.
No, it's just something I think they're rolling into next year they would have, the project would be completed next year, so they would make the expenditure and also receive the revenue in next year's budget.
And then the only other question I had was, this may have been discussed as far as prisoner housing, the 125 appropriation increase.
You're on what
Part-
page now, Cindy?
Page 3. On page 2, department contingent, I assume that's the decrease, the 127. And then on page 3, it's for prisoner housing, appropriation increase of 125.
Correct.
And so why is that out of the contingent?
Well, there's no direct appropriation for prisoner outboarding, it's always
Okay,
been
that's
funded
what
through
I
the
assumed it
contingent
was.
account.
That's the outboarding expense.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that was all I had.
All in favor? Any opposed?
5-0.
Number 2 is to authorize an agreement between Family Services and various county agencies for administrative costs.
Motion.
Moved by Gene, second. I'll second it. Questions for Josh on this?
Yeah, I also had some questions about this. You know, in reading through the memorandum of agreement, and I understand it's, I guess you could call it kind of a form of mandate relief, because now we're gonna be looking at, efforts that are done by other departments and billing to, Family Services, Department of Family Services. But I guess my question is, if you look through here, and, okay, it says, the federal and state reimbursement, either through a plan or by direct billing, the agency shall provide supporting documentation to substantiate all the related administrative costs incurred and or expended. And then documentation is to be provided no later than quarterly, so we'd be getting a quarterly report on, you know, exactly what's being tallied to go into Family Services to be reimbursed. So I guess my question is, and I'm sorry, I had notes on my other agenda. It says, reasonable, if I can find it in here, reasonable and appropriate, I think was the words. So,
Consistent and equitable.
consistent and equitable?
Is that what you're referring?
Right. Reasonable, consistent, and equitable. The allocation basis used for each cost center must be reasonable, consistent, and equitable. And I'm not sure that, you know, as far as billing Family Services, what kind of basically check and balance we have on the other end to make sure that it is equitable and reasonable. You know, because it's gonna be staff time, and, you know, I'm just wondering what mechanism is in place to ensure that we're not overbilling, you know what I'm saying?
The agreement would put in place a formalized agreement between a department and social services. So that's something that would get signed off on by me, the department head, and the commissioner. And then bills will be sent from the department to the Department of Social Services that the commissioner would then verify, along with his fiscal staff, that they deem appropriate. If they don't feel something's appropriate, they wouldn't get signed and reimbursed.
So, is that the quarterly report that?
Well, I think what that's referring to is social services wants the departments to bill them at least quarterly. So don't wait for a whole year to bill us, and then just bill us at least on a 3-month interval, so they don't get flooded with documents and bills at the end of the year. That would be something from a department, multiple departments going to DFS.
I'm just wondering where this originated.
Well, we've been looking into some of these. The benefit is if you can show and direct bill the administrative costs to social services, you get more reimbursement than if it's in as part of the indirect cost allocation plan. So any dollar we can direct bill versus having included in the indirect costs, you pick up more federal revenue. So that's the impetus why we're trying to get this in place.
Well, I understand it's to increase reimbursement through the state and federal
Yeah,
government.
so you wouldn't necessarily have a cost, we're today incurring the same cost as we will tomorrow from the administrative department, it's just you, at the end of the day, have more, be able to draw down more revenue. So ultimately, you would benefit the county share without increasing costs, you would see more revenue for the same cost you're incurring today, by shifting costs out of the indirect plan into a direct bill.
Okay, my question was just, you know, the careful oversight of what's actually billed. So it gets signed off by.
Well, the department,
Imagine.
myself, and the commissioner of social services will all have and the county attorney will all sign off on these agreements, and then the billing would go from the department to social services, and if there's questionable bills, obviously there'd have to be a discussion about what the justification was for them to bill for X cost.
But what would trigger that? What would trigger a questionable billing?
The commissioner
The
won't sign off
commissioner
on the
wouldn't.
payment of the,
Like if all of a sudden a department that tried to bill them for 100% of their costs, which wouldn't, I mean, they wouldn't do that, but it would, like, well, he would then question, why are we paying for your full departmental cost when you probably are on the order of 25% or 50% of your staff time is for
That
social
sounds like
services
another
functions.
full-time job. Just tracking that.
Is it involving outside agencies, or is this just
Just
in-house?
internal.
The indirect cost plan is done by an external vendor that specializes in stuff, but we'd be pulling a subset of that, the cost in there into these internal direct bills. So it's just
So this is business that is done by the county
For social
For
for
services.
social services.
for it's not outside agencies that are working
county
for
departments.
social services.
County department.
Just county department.
No, I
And before it
understand
was
that.
done how?
Through a formulary basis, not a direct bill basis, so.
It was always included in the indirect cost allocation plan. Like, so the cost would all be there, but you draw down less revenue when it's in that plan versus a direct bill.
Can you give an example?
Angela's here, audit.
You want me to give an
I mean, they
example?
probably, I don't know what,
I was
I
talking,
need
Mary
that.
Marino, the fiscal officer there, had been looking at different ways to possibly bill. So for an example, the number of invoices we handle in our office are roughly, say, 60,000 in a year. About half, statistically, which we have for years, kept these statistics, about half of them are social services. So when they do the indirect cost allocation, half of my staff time and cost administratively is allocated to DFS. When they break that down and spread it across for the federal reimbursement, only 25% of that actually can be recouped. If we direct bill, then the fiscal officer there has stated that she can get about 50% of that cost actually. So even though there's not gonna be too much different being done in my office because I have my counts of our number of invoices, number of vouchers and all this information.
So that will
She
still
will take
occur.
that, yeah, because I have those stats, we keep track of them on a monthly basis, I usually report them quarterly to you. She's saying I can almost double my revenue. So, instead of only 25%, so instead of saying 125, say it might cost 125,000 she would get in federal aid, now she might be able to get 250,000 because she's going to direct bill. She's gonna be able to say, this is the actual number of vouchers processed and such. You
She
can do
has
it on
the
different.
time to do that? I
Well,
mean,
we're-
I would imagine that takes time, energy, tracking. Which department would be doing that piece of that?
I believe whatever department's gonna bill is gonna have to put their proof together, and then it's about, we'll go through the voucher process.
It's all about billable hours.
Yes.
Billable hours,
Well,
get it?
and the methodology can be
Reimburse.
different. You could bill by hours, you could bill by number of vouchers, you could bill by project. That's what has to be reasonable, that's what has to be acceptable, equitable through the state. And I think the state has looked at this and made suggestions about trying to go to more direct billing, is that correct, Josh? At
Yeah,
some point?
there's
So,
not a public release yet, but they're doing some work with some various counties and looking at this issue.
so it's something that appears to be acceptable to move forward with that, from my understanding. And if it means bringing more revenue in, the expenses are gonna stay the same, but you may get more revenue, so then that's less county share coming out
As
of my
long as the
budget.
checks and balances are there to determine, you're talking billable hours.
Or
You know
another
what I'm saying?
methodology, like
I
just
mean, it's
used the
still our
example-
money, it's still the taxpayers'
Right.
money, so,
Right, but if they decide
oversight
to bill
of
based on a
these,
project or number of
right?
vouchers or
Oversight
invoices.
going back
Yeah,
to
there's-
DFS.
The commissioner would have the ultimate sign off. If he's not comfortable with what he's being submitted, he's not gonna sign off on the bills.
Questions? All in favor? Any opposed?
5-0.
Third resolution is to adopt the solid waste fee schedule for 2014, which is the same as the one for 2013.
Correct.
Move.
Who's gonna move it?
I'll move it. Second.
Donna? Kitty?
Questions?
Yeah, I'd like, if it's okay, Myra, could you just, so that people who weren't at all those meetings, the solid waste meetings, just give the Reader's Digest condensed version cliff notes of the difference between the ad valorem system and the fee system. Because it seems like,
Where is that?
we're staying with the system for
The last one.
for the time being.
The fee system that we have now was initiated a few years ago by virtue of a local law, which was adopted by your predecessor legislature. It's based on a schedule which you're adopting here, which is based on class codes formulated by the state of New York, which are really used by assessors for the purpose of classifying property. Prior to that, and what was discussed as far as going back to what we had before was an ad valorem basis. An ad valorem basis is based on the value, is a tax based on the value of the property. So if your property is worth more, your property will be assessed for more, and you'll pay more taxes. If your property is worth less money and the assessor assesses it for less, you'll pay less taxes. It's how all that money goes into the general fund usually, and that's how we pay for things, normally. The fee schedule was adopted for other reasons, to try to capture tax exemptions, for example. But there was, it's like, it groups everything, like the first category, residential. So all residential, year-round residential, is based on the class code determined by the assessor, but it's not really based on use. It's based on construction. In other words, if you build a year-round house, which is capable of being lived in year-round, then the assessor's gonna give you a certain classification, and you're gonna pay $120. You may only come up and use that house once a year and generate no solid waste at all, but you're gonna pay the same as a family of 10 who generates an enormous amount of solid waste.
Or condo units.
Right, or condo units, or, mobile home parks, or whatever. So, but that's a difference. I know when this law was first discussed, there was an attempt to create more categories than what we have here to make it more equitably reflect use or generation of solid waste. But in an attempt to simplify it, the number of categories were reduced. As a result of that simplification, however, you do get some inequities because of the example I just gave you.
So, I'm a little, a single residence gets at the same rate as a condominium and or a trailer
No.
park? They're not looked at as commercial?
It depends on the class code. A mobile home in a trailer park, if it's classified as a year-round residence, pays the same as a $2 million house in, Chapin Estates, if it's classified as a year-round residence. So, same for a condominium, or anything that's classified as a 210 year-round residence.
I think where the equity comes in is, this is really a two-part fee structure. You have the access fee, which is the fee that you see in the resolution. So and then you have the tipping fee. So if you have, that big McMansion and,
In
you have
Westchester County.
in Sullivan County, and you have throwing big parties every weekend, and you're generating a lot of
Hopefully all.
trash, then you're gonna be paying more in terms of tipping your garbage at the landfill. So that's, I think, where the equity part of it. And the original structure that was proposed, I think, was very difficult to enforce, it's very difficult to manage, and it resulted in some very large fee structures for very small businesses, just generated, like if you're a restaurant, there are potentially fees of several $1,000s. So, you know, there's not a perfect system, but I think there is equity when you factor in the tipping fee and the garbage generation side of it.
While the class codes aren't the most best use, if you will, for that, it's not modeled very differently than sewer charges when they're on a per unit basis. A lot of the villages and some of the town sewer, where they don't have meters or flow meters, they basically charge for a portion of the cost of the system gets billed on a per unit basis. So if it's a single family, two family, three family, they don't care whether there's 4 residents in a single family home or 1 resident, and it's kind of, that's the way the blend of the system works. But while it's not perfect, it's what we've got. This resolution just keeps the fee schedule the same. If we want to have a larger discussion, I'm sure we can have that next month.
It's the same thing, if you have a $500,000 house or a $50,000 house, your 210 pays the same, it doesn't matter.
So I'm passing
wasn't-
this resolution, it's just the rate schedule for 2014, and it's what we had in 2013, there's no change.
No increase.
And as far as the ad valorem tax, from what I understand, because I did attend the meetings, somebody like me in District 5, where I have larger landowners, maybe, more property, the assessment is what's gonna, increase, their tax. So you and I had the discussion, try to find out in my district where it lies, where my assessments are, because you had that flow sheet of the, if it's a 150,000 assessment, it's gonna, you may pay more, but under 100,000 you would pay less. So you have to look at, I represent a district that has, bigger property owners.
It wasn't my intention in answering Cora's question to be judgmental or to create, this kind of controversy, but I was just trying to explain
What we got.
the,
We're sticking with what we got.
we are for now.
For now.
Since we only have 45 minutes.
For now.
All in favor?
5 zip.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the Division of Public Safety budget discussion. If Dick would like to just maybe make a 5-minute kind of overview on the division as a whole, and then we'll move into, I know there's several people here from probation, we'll take them first, so that they can move on. So Dick, you want to just do your...
Okay, as a whole, public safety, as you well know, we get our challenges from the weather these days. And with what happened in the last 2 years with Irene and with Sandy, we are doing a lot of reassessment of how we responded. We're trying to reposition ourselves to take advantage of some new technology, for instance, with social networking. As we go down the road out at the EOC, we will be broadcasting information through social networking, which we did not previously do. We have some more equipment to work with. The state is now not giving counties under the hazmat program, hazardous materials. They're giving it by regional approach, so Ulster, Sullivan, Orange, and Rockland County, we are a 4-county consortium, just like we've done with the radio program and the grants, and we're working with these other counties in the event of a hazmat incident. We then would reach out for one or more of our partners to assist us. And in light of that, as I've mentioned before, Sullivan County is taking the lead with radiological measurement equipment, which the state is purchasing for us. We're training with the other counties, but we would be the radiological response, where if it was chemical, Rockland would take the lead because they've got a number of industries down there that require their preparedness in that direction. Overall, I'll start out very quickly. The coroner's budget, which was on page 311 of the proposed budget, is basically put together with the assumption that the numbers that they're providing, and the very little increase here, is based upon the fact that we've got to do autopsies for any death which is, shall we say, needs to be investigated, whether it's unattended or it's another issue from law enforcement, they want to have it checked. There's like one of the numbers that I look at, we have $90,000 for autopsies. Now that's a fluid number, because some years we have more deaths that require autopsies, other years we have less. So the basics of that number doesn't mean that we're spending $90,000, okay? But we need to have that in the budget in the event that should happen. The equipment you know, the things that the coroners use. They also have to go for their annual training. There are 4 elected coroners, and they do a good job for us. And I believe that the budget is, as it's prepared, is very conservative, and hopefully we will not exceed it in any fashion. And what I'm trying to say, I hope we don't have any more deaths than what we planned for overall. Public Safety Administration, that's the Homeland Security side of the house. Basically, that's flat. It's like a $2,000 less than last year. For the county share, a lot of what we do in that side of the house, as you well know, is working with grants and trying to perform as best we can with some of the new the new mandates that the governor has placed in his Leaning Forward program. Leaning Forward basically means that if we know a storm is coming or something should be flooding, something of that nature, he wants to have equipment posed and in a holding operation so that they will be able to move out quicker and faster than we've done in the past. And that's everything from snowstorms, against the flooding and so forth. There's a lot of activity. We've got a governor that's very supportive to the emergency services, and we sure enough are trying to take advantage of his attention, and I compliment him for that. The next one would be fire protection. That one is as flat as you can get. There's not as much money in that, which is good. When I say not as much money, it's a big increase of all of $500, and I think that was for employee benefits partially and some contractual services. There's no change of personnel, anything like that. I have 5 deputies that respond to calls throughout the county when one fire department goes to assist another, or we have a call at a county facility. Every time there's a call out at the Liberty Complex, one of the deputies does respond with the Liberty Fire Department to ensure that everything is okay from our perspective, and thank God we've never had really any incidents of any seriousness. Again, depending on storms, those deputies can run more often because they always will represent us wherever we go. Stop DWI budget, as it's in the tentative budget, I have reworked those numbers. And this is a flow-through. This is not taxpayer money. This is all fine money.
Can you give us a page?
A page initially, Cindy, was 368. Okay, the original budget that we had put together was at $281,000. Again, all fine money. And one of the things that I was able to do and to sit with staff is to go over our revenues that are coming in from the fines. And there was a drop in revenue from DWIs. There's less DWIs being issued by our law enforcement agencies, and that's including state police, sheriff, and the 3 Village of Liberty, Village of Monticello, Town of Fallsburg, so that we've redone that budget, so it's a $262,000 DWI budget. That has already been submitted. You approved the plan back about a month ago, submitted to the Governor's Highway Traffic Safety. And we will continue to give money out of this plan to our district attorney for prosecution for DWI, to probation for the monitoring of DWI offenders. We also give money to the Recovery Center, some money to BOCES for training, and also to Joe Todor's group for some education and counseling of DWI folks, as well as money to the sheriff and the 3 local police agencies for sobriety checkpoints. A week and a half ago, the Village of Liberty and New York State Police did a 4-hour sobriety checkpoint, which the money for the overtime for the officers to work that night for the village, as well as from the state, all came out of the DWI funds. They wound up with 3 DWIs and a whole bunch of V&Ts and 3 felons who were out and about and were placed into custody and taken. So that works out in more ways than one, and there'll be more coming up, especially around the holidays. Word to the wise. I hope the press is listening to me. But it's $262,000, and I believe that that's a very realistic number in terms of what we will be collecting versus how we can spend it and try to keep the county safe and educate people not to drink and drive, as well as to take, the other issue is take any type of pills, call them pharmaceuticals, anything that's going to make you affect how you drive. It's kind of an education process.
I'm sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I've got 281, not 262.
Yeah, that's why I'm like,
They revised it downward after the tentative budget was submitted, right?
okay.
Yes.
And being that it's a flow-through, it's just to a decrease in revenue and
Thought you
expense.
said
But
that.
it's not because there's a decrease in the number of people out there on the road. driving.
Well, there's less fines coming in because we're not getting as many DWI people being arrested for DWI. Okay, there's a number of reasons why that is.
Maybe the program's working.
Yeah, I'm taking pride that I believe the program is working. I also have to tell you statewide that through the DWI Coordinators Association, there's a number of counties that are also experiencing the same situation
So
as
that's
we
good
are.
news.
That is good news, yes it is. Although I wish that we didn't get 60 to 80 people coming to the Victim Impact Panel, which is scheduled next Tuesday, right here at the Legislative Hearing Room. I'd like to see that down to, 20 and 30, but we still have a lot of people that are being picked up. Animal control, that's $2,500, that's between the town of Liberty, which takes any of the dogs that we have, that would be the canines only, and then Joanne Giroux has been hired in the past. I guess we'll have to review that with her assignment as to being the animal control officer. That's all animals in addition to dogs. Okay, so that's $2,500. Again, that's a guesstimation, because all we have to do is find one of these hoarders, like we did in the town of Lake Huntington a few years ago, that had 50 dogs and almost 100 cats. And then we wind up picking up the bill on it, but that's another story. The last group to go over, and that's the Electric Licensing Board. I've been working with Cora. We are still looking at the focus of that organization and the what the work of the county should be. I got 379, maybe it's 380.
Well,
Okay, 380, right. This is something that is ongoing. Our biggest, problem, as I've talked to you in the past, is the fact of who's gonna do enforcement after the licenses are issued. We do need to get a new round of tests put together, and I am working with the White Plains Senior Electrical Inspector. He does a lot of work with the Westchester folks, and we're trying to get a new test put together through a company that will administer it and so forth. That will be no cost to the county. That'll be borne by those that take the test. But we still need to look at what we're doing with electric licensing. Cora and I will hopefully, after you get through your budget process, sit down again and try to address that for whatever it needs.
I think we should have a further conversation on this. I don't think it's fair just to license electricians. I think all types of trade should be licensed. It's kind of like we're picking and choosing who gets a license and who doesn't. Plumbers, general contractors, everybody should be licensed, so you know you're getting a quality product.
It sounded like you were going the other way.
Oh, no, I'm going the other way.
Well, I know he's going the other way, but
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is, if you're gonna pick on electricians, you should pick on everybody else as well. You can't just pick and choose.
Well,
Yeah, but it's just bearing in mind, you would have to have an administration put together that could administer, test, award licenses.
understand.
And then the hardest part of this is, and I'm really not a budget thing, so please excuse me. The hardest part is, when I get a complaint, it's one electrician against another.
Yeah.
It's not the public complaint about the
Right.
electrician, because the 15 towns and 6 villages all have code enforcement officers. They're the people that go out, inspect the job, say it's the right wire, it's the wrong wire, and so forth. That's not our job.
That's right.
That's not our
I
job.
know we've had this conversation numerous times.
Absolutely.
But it's just.
I know what you're saying.
Could
I know what
you
you're
just
saying.
update me, what goes on in other counties around our size with electrical licensing?
For the most part, most of the counties do not have electric licensing laws. However, Orange does have one now, as well as Rockland County. That's the closest.
Doesn't
The rest of
Greene-
it is all
Greene
in
County
in
too?
Greene
There's
County.
quite a few.
Yeah,
John,
I'm going to
can I
bottom
make a
first.
suggestion that we're having a public
Substantially
safety
more.
meeting at 12:45 today, and we stick to the budget, and whatever questions
Right.
that we have can come up in the course of the
Second
regular
that.
business.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. No problem there.
I believe
Pretty
that
much.
I've covered
You've
everybody.
covered all
Yep.
your,
Unless there's
statements.
anything else.
Thank you. Probation.
I handed out the fact sheet, I went over everything that we did about 9 o'clock tonight, full of functions that probation does. Essentially, the department is under the gun right now to do understaffing, and the 2014 budget is an increase of $62,457 as opposed to last year. That is page 354. And you'll see that positions increased from 25 to 27. That is the addition of a probation officer and the addition of a part-time account clerk with no benefits. In reference to the addition of the officer, it's really an issue of alleviating the caseload burden for the rest of the department. And additionally, we have two major issues within the probation department that affect the county, and cost the county quite a bit of money. We have an inability at present to process the pre-sentence reports that the courts require. And previously, we get these reports done in anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, and now it is taking anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks to process these reports. Because of that, you have individuals that remain incarcerated because their cases are not being heard before the court for final disposition. And you also have individuals who are going to go to the Department of Corrections to state prison, but we cannot process those cases if pre-sentence reports are there. Instead of the state picking up the cost, it is the county absorbing that cost. And to give you an example, one person would be about $9,000 those additional weeks that they spend incarcerated. You figure there's anywhere from 10 to 20 individuals that fall under that throughout the year. It's over 90,000. It's over $100,000. So essentially, by adding that additional position, it's really a win for the county because that position, I think, with benefits. Carol, do you know what it is?
Jeff, I think, we've gone over the staffing plan. I think
Yeah.
everybody is comfortable
Yeah.
with,
Okay,
so
with
I don't,
that.
you
Yeah,
don't,
everybody's
you
on
don't have
board
to
with
spend a lot of time
No.
justifying those
Okay.
positions. We understand, and I think there's general agreement that that's
Also,
Glad they-
this
money
came
well
in under
spent.
the
Angel
tax
needs help,
cap.
bottom line.
Not included in this budget, tentative budget, there was a discussion concerning the pretrial release program. I have a draft of resolution. We do need another person for a pretrial release, and that is, and I don't want to rehash everything's been rehashed before, but that position would essentially pay for itself. You have,
Is that an entry level, Jeff?
that's entry level, that's correct. At present, if you go to page 356, which is the alternative incarceration program, for community service, the county share is $72,376. Because of the amount of individuals on community service, there's about $70,000 savings to the county. So really, that position would cost about $2,000 because those individuals, if they weren't on community service, they would be incarcerated. Moving to page 357, this is the additional request for staff. The pretrial release program right now is saving the county about $1 million. There's 80 individuals that ordinarily would be incarcerated. They are under pretrial release at this juncture. With the additional staff, I believe we could, at minimum, get another 20 to 30 individuals released from the jail, and would be some of the overcrowding and the necessity of outboarding inmates. There's really not, if there's any specific questions, the only increases we have with the probation department for line items in 364 is that we have an increase, substantial increase for lodging and meals, just because we will have new staff coming aboard, and it's required that they, to get state reimbursement, that those individuals be trained. The training is 3 weeks in Albany, and the meals a substantial increase from the year before. But once again, those are things that are necessary, and there's really no way around it. All the other, if there's any specific questions concerning any other line items, there's really nothing that has increased substantially.
When you're talking about the pretrial release, you're not talking about repeat offenders going out to burglarize or whatever.
No, and to give you an example, there's an 80% success rate for the pretrial release program. 8 out of 10 individuals don't get into other difficulties with law enforcement. And maybe Angel can answer this, we have a pretrial release coordinator here. I think the majority of it is not that they've committed, if people fail in the pretrial release program, it's not because they've committed another crime, it's maybe they have an issue that they haven't, it might be a drug-related issue that we want them to go to a drug treatment program, they refuse, and we view them as a liability to remain in the community, and the judge incarcerates them once again. Very, very few commit another crime. Obviously, they're screened to make sure that that is not an issue that would come up in the future.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, when I look at this meal line, in 2013 it was $400 and it's up to $3,600? I mean, I understand.
Yeah, they're eating filet mignon.
Why not, I mean.
They're not, well, yeah, 3 times that. What that is,
I understand that.
you're gonna have, it's essentially 4 officers, four new officers, for a total of 15 days. And you add that up, that's what it comes out to, a surprise.
Do you have a limit that they
Yeah, we have a
can
limit.
spend per day on
Absolutely,
food?
absolutely. We don't allow them, like I said, filet mignon, they're not ordering that.
If
No,
I
no,
want
nobody will
filet
allow them.
mignon and I didn't eat
Yeah.
breakfast and lunch, then I should be able to have it, but I'm saying usually it's a amount per day.
Remind me not to take, remind me not to
For
take after
dinner
dinner.
example is a maximum of $25 and up to a 20% tip. So if you give me an itemized receipt for $50 and it was, say, $40 meal, $10 tip, we're still gonna cut it down to that max of 30. You have to have the itemized receipt, there has to be no alcoholic beverages purchased, and meal is $25 max with up to 20% tip, because that's reasonable and customary and allowed.
So meal per,
That would be your dinner. Overall, if you're out for
Overall.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your
Right.
maximum would be up to $50 with up to a $10 tip, I believe, so it still maxes out. Breakfast is a 10, dinner, with up to $12 because of a tip. If I remember correctly, lunch is 15, which can go up to $18 with a tip, itemized properly and documented. Dinner, 25, $5 tip.
okay.
Cora?
Thank you.
And I can tell you that most of the officers, I'm just reviewing, because obviously I have to sign off on their vouchers, they really don't go for the $25 dinner. Most are probably like in the $15 to $17 range.
Okay.
Nobody's really trying to, get rich on
Go to
that.
McDonald's and
Cora?
it's $25
Okay, I
bucks.
just wanna focus on the big picture for a second, because we had an hour-long meeting with probation in the jail on Tuesday. The $1 million savings figure is all in, right? We're looking at 400,000 from the ATI and 600,000 from the pre-release. Is that how you came up with the $1 million figure?
No, my $1 million figure is the fact that it's based on the amount of people that I have out already to date, times my people are usually out of jail anywhere from a month to 6 months, depending on where they are in the criminal justice system. If they haven't pled guilty yet, I've had somebody on my caseload for almost 2 years. So it varies as far as the formula. So I went based on a medium formula, which is 12 to 15 weeks, times what daily cost.
But isn't that very unusual to have somebody sit there for 2 years and not be, is that unusual case, would you say?
That is very
Okay,
unusual,
that's
very
right.
unusual.
Got a good lawyer, or an expensive one.
I'm
With
not
the
sure.
addition of an officer to solely dedicated to pretrial release program, if you're figuring you have 5 to 6 people released each month, and they're in there for about 6 months, they would be expected to be in there for incarcerated 6 months. It's $300,000 right there. And there's no question we could do something like that. Because, for example, in 2008 we had 154 people released on the pretrial program. In 2010 we had 115. Once the position was consolidated, the numbers dropped down drastically. We go to 84 and 83. So historically, we have always had over 100 individuals released on the pretrial release program when it was fully staffed. Recently, the past 3 years, just because of the staffing issues, it's really running around 80. So there's no question that the addition of that individual dedicated to that program would provide a substantial savings to the county. It's probably more than $300,000.
So how long would it take before we start to see a reduction in those costs? By the time someone's in, because they have to be trained and go for their meals and stuff.
I would say it would be rather quickly, because I believe that Jeff is hoping to have another probation officer take over, so they're already familiar with supervision, caseload, and what's expected of the defendants.
But I would like to add, it'd be really robbing Peter to pay for Paul, because an officer I put there would put a burden on the rest of the staff that would jam up, like, let's say, I mentioned before, the 3 cents reports. I wouldn't think you would have the savings probably the second quarter of 2014, right around April, May. I can give you some very specific numbers. It's going to take, it's not going to be an immediate ramp up.
Talking 5 to 6 months, basically.
Exactly.
Well, part of the reason I'm asking is because it was just when Hal did his report in the regular meeting that it came up, we're at this amount. So if we have quarterly reports that show that, the same with the savings we got by putting the video conferencing in, we didn't know in advance how much savings there would be. But if we could have those quarterly reports, then this way we can at least keep our finger on the pulse as it's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Jim, you wanna?
Yep, the DA's budget is flat from last year.
302.
302. 302.
Sorry.
302.
Just telling what page you're on.
We're flat from last year. The increases are driven by the increases in the lines for the employee benefits. I am concerned about the revenue from the Stop DWI program. I had a conversation with Dick about that. The revenue is also flat. I did not put in the revenue, the increase in the DA salary, but the state says that we're going to pick that up, so that should be fully funded, and that number should go to $75,000 to offset the last of the 3 increases of the DA state salary increase. Personal services are flat across the board, and the budget is austere. The DWI numbers, just to echo what Dick said, our DWI numbers historically in this county were always over 500. We peaked at 622 DWIs in 2010. We had 401 prosecutions for DWI last year. We're on a pace for just a little over 300 this year. That means that money from the state is going to dry up, because it's directly related to the amount of DWIs. I believe that's attributable. Unfortunately, I wished it was because less people were driving intoxicated, but I don't believe that's the case. What I believe is the case is that
So it's not good news.
both the sheriff's department, the state police hiring freeze, they've just got a new class finally after I don't know how many years. All of our police forces and our local police agencies have been cut. There's less police patrolling the highways. That means there's less people being apprehended for those types of crimes. So I would like to say that it's working, but I think at some level, historically, we're always over 500, always, even in slow years. And we're gonna hit 300, maybe we'll hit 300 this year, maybe. So I'm worried about that for the next budget year. But again, the DA's budget is flat. We're dealing with the same staff that we've been dealing with after the cuts that we instituted in 2010, and we've remained constant. We're not asking for any new positions. We're asking to remain constant as we have throughout the last 4 years after the 2 cuts that we did make. Two and a half. We cut full-time grand jury stenographer. That's now part-time. Substantial savings, as well as a secretary and 1 ADA. So we're operating at 7 as opposed to 8 or 9 as we traditionally have. Well, crime's been on the rise. It really jumped in 2010, but we've seen some recession, and the numbers for 2013 are very heartening, because they are less than 2012 in all the 3 quarters. All the numbers are down, so hopefully we can keep that going in the third quarter. But again, I think that's attributable to lack of manpower in a lot of these departments, and less people patrolling, and less people being apprehended.
Any questions for Jim? Thank you for coming over, we appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Michael, you're up.
Here's 7 minutes.
Mike, you want to say
The sheriff's office starts on 3/28. Mike, if you wanna maybe, I think most of the questions generally are gonna center around manpower, so if you wanna
Well, I
kinda.
was gonna say, just for an opener,
You can start
you know,
with
we
that.
looked at the
this time.
budget that the county manager put together, and there were some cuts across the board, which we'll try to live within the budget and try to make things stretch. There are only a couple of points that I would bring up that I would have a question, and then anything anybody else has. Basically with birds and drugs, we're in the middle of a heroin and a prescription drug epidemic. Proposition 1 passing, the manpower is our major problem. We asked for 5 positions, which was just to offset what we lost with the deconsolidation of 911. The industry standard is 1 post is 5 1/4, 5 1/2 positions. Now we have to put someone on desk, and we had given up 5 positions for the consolidation. So we asked for the 5. With all that's going on in the county, we're down 1 school resource officer, and after Sandy Hook and all the problems that are going on, the big piece of the drug problem starts in the schools. We need to be in the schools. We can't walk away from that. We need our gang and drug enforcement team to make the arrests. It's just not a time to cut back on those things. So I would push strongly for the 5 bodies we asked for. It takes about a year to get a deputy hired in the academy and out on the road where they're doing us any good. So we have to look forward. It's a little different in the jail. We can hire somebody, we can put them to work, and they're effective for us. We have up to a year to get them to the academy. The road patrol's a different animal. And as I said, with Proposition 1 coming in, hopefully we're going to get a casino. But even without that, with the crime and everything that's going on, I would push strongly for those 5 positions. Other than that, the overtime. They allotted $120,000 in overtime. There were 2 positions approved in that budget. They will generate, going to the academy, $20,000, $10,000 apiece on their own for back and forth from the academy, which brings that number, if we get those 2 positions, if you approve them, the 2 of the 5 were approved, that brings us down to $100,000. With our contract overtime that we get reimbursed for, we have almost no overtime left on the board. If you were to approve 3 additional positions, that would be another $30,000 in overtime also, which would boost that number. So the overtime is under. I would look for that to come up, and I would ask for the additional manpower. The rest of the cuts to the budget, I would look to live within our means and try to make things work.
What, I don't understand how going from 17 million to 19 million is a cut.
17 million to me.
That was,
Well, there's
employee
raises
benefits.
built into that, there's other things, those are.
That's not a cut. I don't understand, if the 2013 amended budget was 17 million, 17.965, and 2014 was 19.084. How is going from 17 million to 19 million a cut?
There were cuts in different categories. Some things have gone up in cost. Overall, the raises built in for the jail and the road patrol.
But even if you look at personnel services, it goes from 10.3 to 10.9. So if you're saying that that you moved people about and that it was change in salaries or whatever, benefits, however you're looking at that, it's 6 up, not down.
Just a point of information, this sheet, 320 you're looking at, includes the road patrol, the civil office, the court officers, his admin, and the jail. So it's not, if you're looking at that, it's his whole operation.
And in that, the contract services went from 2.5 to 2.2, so that's where the cuts, I think you're referring to, Mike.
Well, if you look at the sheet that, I asked Janet to put together, we know that we're not at the all-time high.
I didn't get
of
that.
43 in 2008.
Came out this
So
morning.
there's an additional 2 from 35 to 37
Give it to
in
me.
2013 and 2014. Thank you for doing what we needed to do. The overtime went from 248,000 in 2009, year-to-date 179,000. And you add all that up, it's over 1.108 million. The temporary deputy sheriff positions, those 5 positions that we created, it was Josh's recommendation that they're put in every year in the budget so that you don't have to come and ask for them every year. Then, this new deputy position, that's 100,000, 2 are included in the tentative budget. Since we started in 2012, there've been 4 promotions, and there've been 4 new hires. The PBA contract in 2008 and 2009, I think when we started, there hadn't been an active contract since 2007, which we pushed very hard, that there's a contract settled through 2017. And then I don't really want to get into the jail overtime. Oh, I was going to say, Pal's not here, but I don't know if you want, I know how hard it is for you to have people, that you have a very high turnover rate, which is why your overtime is between 2009 and year-to-date now.
Well, plus on top of it,
The jail is mandated, so am I correct?
Well, that's part of
So
the
that's
reason
why.
why.
So I mean, that you can't help, right.
So the, overriding feeling that we've cut, when you start to look at what we've actually done.
We haven't really cut.
So I just wanna make sure that when you say that there's a cut, and it went from 17 million to 19 million, I need to be clear on how adding 2 million to a budget is a cut.
Well, looking at you guys here, you're going from almost 18 million to 19 million, so there's $1 million in the raise, it's not a $2 million raise. What would the raises have been for the contract for the road patrol on that? I mean, I can get that number, but it's gonna be fairly substantial. When I say there were cuts in the budget, as you go through the different line items, there were things cut back, our automotive, the overtime, some different things.
But the
The
fact
overall
is,
budget
we have
has.
not cut people, we've added people, since we started as a legislature, am I wrong in that assumption? We've given 4 promotions and 4 new hires.
Well, we've had hires, I think we're.
Yeah,
Backfills, they're not new promotions.
basically flat.
They're backfilling people who left and retired.
And like Jake Gore, the promotion.
But they're getting more money.
No,
No.
well, the
Money stays the same. If you take
But the
somebody.
promotion doesn't mean you're getting more money.
If a person leaves who's earning X amount of dollars and another person takes their place, yeah, the person who got promoted gets more money, but that's not more money to the budget.
I
It's
just
like
wanna
matter
make
and
sure
antimatter.
that the overriding perception that we've cut, when you actually look at what we've done.
Have you cut personal services? No, they got promotions, they got contract raises. So the answer is
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
But the other items we asked for have been cut, automotive, overtime.
Well, that's what I did recognize the fact that you have reined in your overtime from 248,000 in 2009 and 179, which does give you more room for another full-time road patrol person.
Now, a big piece of this is gonna be the raises. If you want me to get that broken down for you, we can, try to get a breakdown of what those raises meant for the road patrol for each member and add that up, but it's gonna be probably a good portion of that. When I say there were cuts to individual, pieces of the budget. Overall, it went up, but a lot of that is not gonna be, from things, within our control, the budget, to give the raises. If you're gonna give raises, there were raises in, benefits, I believe, built into that. So those are things that you can't, well, the raise you can control, and I thank you for the raises, but benefits and things like that are gonna be built in there, I believe. And those are things none of us at this table can control, those are gonna be dictated to us, and they're gonna show up. But as far as the, budget, as I said, the only 2 issues I would look at with you would be the overtime, because basically when you deduct everything, if we do get those 2 new bodies, 20 grand of that is gonna be just to get back and forth to the academy. And then if I'm asking for the full 5 to be, put in, something you'll decide as a group, as a body. I think it's necessary, and I think we have to start getting ahead of the curve, just to start dealing with the drug problem, staying in the schools.
Hold on,
Yes.
Gene and then Kathy.
All right.
Then kidding.
I'll bring this up again, I brought it up last year. In all the years that my grandparents lived here, my parents lived here, and I've lived here, the undersheriff always ran the road patrol. I really don't see a justification for a chief of road patrol. I think the undersheriff should be running the road patrol. And with that money that we could save there, we could hire 2 other road patrol officers.
Well, 2 things with that. One, there was a chief of road patrol. We did not invent the position. At some point, the history I'm getting from the sheriff's office was, the chief of road patrol was promoted to undersheriff, and he wanted nothing to do with the jail or the civil. So they kind of just let that ride, and they did not replace it. I don't know what the budgetary reasons were at that time that they allowed it to go away. I'm sure there was a trade-off somewhere, that they got something over here and gave that up to get something different. But there was a badge sitting in the box for chief of road patrol. It was not a new position we created. It's a big operation. Administratively, I say routine. Now, the undersheriff works with me to run the whole operation. He is not the chief of the road patrol. How it was done before as sheriff, I say, I feel this is necessary. I feel it's prudent. And to talk about what you could hire, Blake Muthig is here working as chief of patrol as Chief Hawker was. They are on a 211 waiver.
I
You
understand
pay their
that.
salary and you pay their, no benefits. That's it. They're like contract workers. You could not hire 1 deputy basically for their salary. And you're getting more bang for your buck having Blake Muthig or having Art Hawker than 1 more road deputy. But,
Well, I don't think it's appropriate to bring up anybody's name. That is not why I brought that up.
I was just gonna ask where it is, I missed it, I haven't seen it here in months.
Well,
I think it
regardless.
still works for you.
when I bring up their
Okay.
names, it's not to add good or bad to it. What I'm saying, those are people who worked at the state police. They're here, they're already retired, they're on a 211 waiver, and it's a big savings for our county having them. You're not paying benefits with them, and I look at it as a bonus for the county, that if I were to promote somebody to that, or do away with a position and hire a deputy, there's no monetary savings. But having his experience, having his ability in the road patrol, I think has a very big dollar value.
I have 2 questions.
Pass it.
Okay, according to
Agree to
the
disagree.
the chart here, if we were to, every new deputy position is $100,000, that's with pension and benefits, is that correct?
Ballpark,
Okay.
I'd have to
And we
say.
gave you 2, but you need 3 more. Okay, we have to live within our tax cap, okay, so that would be, we can't lift the cap because we voted not to. So my question to you is 2 things. First of all, could you come back to us? I get the overtime stuff. Last year you came back to us, you found money with the drugs and the medicine, whatever, but I get that, but in order for us to live within the cap, we can't now give you the more money in overtime. But could you come back to us in 6 months and see if you could find a savings somewhere else? We have a discussion later on.
Well, anytime we find a savings, we'll come back and we'll throw that in the barrel. My concern is that it takes a year to get a deputy effective for a road patrol. We've got 2 people right now, Brian Boyd, one of our lieutenants, has talked about, he expects to retire in the spring. We've got another sergeant who is having some health problems. I won't mention the name because it's a health problem thing. I'm not sure what his longevity may be. He may have to retire this coming year. That would mean that if we lose those 2 positions, if we get the 2 that are in the county manager's budget, we're breaking even. We haven't advanced at all. We're not moving forward and we're not gaining any ground. I'm looking at some point we have to start gaining ground and dealing with the problems at hand. And, you know, I don't like to get ahead of it, but there's a fairly good chance we'll get a casino. We have to start ramping up for that. And being it takes a year to get anybody, if we don't lose anybody else, in addition to those people, you know, we take a step forward and we take 2 back.
Well, if those 2 people leave, you'll have money in your budget to hire 2 new people, is that correct?
But it takes a
No,
whole.
understand.
At an entry level, so you'll be saving money.
Well, we'll promote somebody to theirs and then we'll hire an entry level, but my point is, it's still gonna take a year to get somebody on the road that's gonna be able to handle, criminal investigations, handle crime, make arrests, do, highway interdiction enforcement. So all I'm talking about is the window, Gene, that it's gonna be a year where we're laid up, not that the money will juggle itself out, but We can't turn around and just say we're gonna hire somebody, and then boom, we got somebody.
I
no good.
understand that, and I'm not arguing that point.
And so one last, piece of information. Okay, so you're gonna have 5 temporary positions in the summer, and I think we all agree from June, July, and the summer months, we have the population tripled. And every year you have a problem hiring those 5 part-time deputies, correct?
Yes.
For whatever reason. Is it now, so, I mean, I know you start, what, May, could you start like earliest that those 5 people are in place? So you have actually extra help, because it seems like in the past, you don't get them on board till right later on, so can that help you, so that we have more coverage in the summertime when we need it? I mean, what's that issue?
Well, normally we get them in just before the summer starts.
Well, apparently, we need it year-round, from what you're saying.
Well,
Well, but
we do, but what happens is, Gene, what we need in a year-round, we need more, but when the summer hits and the population triples, there's no way to really hire enough.
I
To
understand.
be prepared that you got the right number in January, and you've got the right number in July. There's no way to have a full-time staff.
And again, I'm not arguing that point. This has been the story in Sullivan County for years and years and years and years. We all know that the population triples or quadruples in the summer. And we've dealt with it for all these years, we still have to deal with it. Let's figure out how to do that.
Could you answer my question, sir? About the
Can we bring them in earlier?
I mean, you said there's always a problem, you always have a problem finding 5 part-time people, correct? So my question is, can you start earlier so that you have those people in place for the summer? Because you had an issue last summer, remember with those?
Well,
So-
we start looking earlier. Some say they're interested and then they drop out. Until you're ready to put them in, some of them find other part-time jobs or get full-time employment. So it's hard to canvass way early because some of those people will say, I'm interested, but we've had people that were interested that at the end of the day, just like our full-time list, we'll go down the list and say, are you interested in being a road patrol deputy? Yes, I am. When it comes time to hire, well, I found a job. I'm already working here or I'm working there. So it's hard to get too far out in front. And you want to keep that window where it's pretty close to the beginning of the summer, so you get the full body of the summer and basically closing out with the work that you encumbered over the summer. The workload, the cases that the deputy will be carrying after the summer needs to be cleaned up. It's not like you just, cut it off and you're done. So we try to cut it as close as we can to the beginning of the summer. And we do look early. We always try to keep our finger on people who have done it for us in the past, potential people that may have retired somewhere. But you want to make sure you cut it as close to the early part as you can, so you got them towards the end, and they can close out some of those cases, and they're not passing those over to other deputies after the summer.
And they stay till when, what month, the hard till?
They're 90 days.
90
so-
days,
It's a
whatever.
90-day window, and
Yeah,
that's
okay.
the problem.
Whatever
We
you think.
can't stretch that. If I could add another month or, 2 months, that'd be great. But we don't have that ability. The provision was worded 90
Just
days
90
and you're
days.
done.
Kitty?
So we have
I
to
believe that's
read-
civil
Hold on.
service
I
law.
wanna go to this chart that says, road patrol. In 2011, you had 42, 2012, you had 38, but then there was that asterisk, so did you have 38 or 37 in 12? And then 13, you were down to 35, so you're looking for 2 more to bring it up to the level that it was in 2012? I mean, I'm not clear on that.
Josh funded the 2
Yeah,
additional.
John's budget.
Mike, I believe, is looking to go to 40 positions.
I don't know what the asterisk is.
That was when the position was abolished in the middle of the year in favor of moving the money to other things, so it's not an exact, it was a head count, but it was agreed we'd abolish one and then we moved the money to other places.
So you wanna go, instead of 37, you wanna go to 40?
Yes.
And if we're looking at county share, it's all?
Yes.
The one thing, Mike, I don't know what the options are, I know I see Dan here, but the school thing, I think, is something that has merit to it. And if there's a way, maybe we could pull a meeting together with the various superintendents and find if there's not an ability to offset at least some of the costs so that it wouldn't be 100% county share. Being that the schools really aren't in session in our peak months, could we find a way to offset some of the costs of a deputy during the school year, and then they'd be freed up to be truly road patrol assistants in July and August while school's
Yes.
closed? And, I know their budgets are as tight as ours, but maybe, you know, we put all the heads together in a room here, we can find a way to at least
We
get.
could find some money, and we could juggle. I'm in a position right now, though, the superintendent of Tri-Valley wants to pay for somebody full-time up there. I don't have a deputy to give him. I can't take another deputy off the road patrol. Kyle, the head president of PBA, will tell you, we're putting out 2 deputies on patrol covering 1,000 square miles. Somebody gets tied up with an arrest, I just don't have the deputy to give them. They'll reimburse me. I could talk to other superintendents. I've been offered some money, but I can't guarantee them the coverage. We're covering basically small staff, Eldred, Monticello, Sullivan West, Tri-Valley, Roscoe, Livingston Manor for school resource.
And you cover Monticello, but you can be covered by their.
It used to be covered by the police department. Board pulled the officer out because they're down on manpower. We were asked to come in because the majority of the people that go to the Monticello school live outside the village. They're town residents. And one of the schools we cover is in Mamakating, and at the time one was in Bethel. So it wasn't that big of a lift. It wasn't a chore. We didn't need the work, but the work needs to be done and to walk away from the school. And Monticello has needs.
When we're talking about Monticello has needs and recognizing that, since my daughter's a teacher in the school, is there any way to get from the education piece reimbursement for this type of thing?
Well, there is, and the superintendent in Monticello, did want to give us money.
He's here for a little while.
But I could not guarantee him enough coverage where I felt it's appropriate to take their money. I don't have somebody that I can put in full-time and just be in Monticello.
Is that why you're here?
If we have more manpower, I think I can get some reimbursement from the schools, and I can work out some sort
I
of.
don't mean just from the school itself, I'm saying, since crime is on an increase and problems in schools and
be right back.
shootings and everything else, statewide, nationwide, bullying, every other bloody thing that goes on in schools anymore, is there a way to get state or federal funding for the additional
Well, why don't-
officer
Gotta be on the
in the
local
school?
level.
Why don't they put it in the school budgets?
Huh?
The school budget could, they do have a.
If you put it in the
Jonathan,
That's what,
Dan has to leave for a
Yeah,
meeting
okay.
at 10:30, and he did have a comment.
go ahead,
so
Dan,
maybe you can add to
jump
this.
in. That's-
First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the time today to address you. When I arrived 3 years ago, the village did pull out. The sheriff was kind enough to come in and meet, and the sheriff's department did put a school resource officer into our school district. We have a dedicated room for the sheriff's department. If they're out on patrol, they have a key to get into the building. They can use it as part. They have a dedicated server of their own. They do not go through the school server, so they can log right in. Everything that they do is confidential. So we have set up an office where a school resource officer that can come in. What I can tell you is that there is not a full-time or even a part-time resource officer in Monticello this year. We have seen rates increase of whether it's bullying or drugs, because of not having a person in uniform walk around the school and having the contacts with the individual. And our school district would, in having a discussion with the sheriff, would step forward to help pay for some of the cost. We're in a tight budget like everybody else is, but we would find a way to partner with the county. We do have a grant writer. We would look forward to using our BOCES grant writer to see if there isn't a cooperative deal that we could put together between the county, the sheriff's department, and also another school district. Other superintendents are very interested in having the school resource officers in their building. What I'm saying to you is there's an increase in crime in our area. The other part that you deal with is the good working relationship that we've developed. You've been able to make, and this is public knowledge, by having kids talk to the school resource officer, you find out a lot of material what's going on in the county. It helps you outside when the sheriffs are on patrol. It helps them with arrest, and I know that's not something that we really publicize, but it's the connections that they make with our children that help us in the outside world. And it also helps them, some of the students who are going into police work and find it as a career. And they're role models for the students that come in. I would ask that you think about putting some officers in. If we have to go back to the superintendents and ask at least to come up for payment, I'll do the best that I can to find money. If you were to put another officer on today in your budget, I can guarantee that that person would be paid for. If there's a chance of maybe putting in another one, I will go to another school district and see if we can't find a way so that if you had 2 resource officers, otherwise what we'll have to wind up doing is hiring somebody that's retired. You don't have that connection for what we truly need.
So you're asking for that to be a full-time school resource officer?
Well, what would help from what I hear today is if you need someone for the summer, you don't need someone in school over Thanksgiving break, you don't need someone in school over December break, you don't need someone in school over April break, and you've got July and August, basically June, July and August, when your summer crew comes up, which we could split if we had to put something together. So we pick up, let's say, 70% of the salary. The sheriff's department picks up 30% of the salary. And we would take it and put it in that way. And if you were to put in additional officers for SROs with the understanding that we have to try funding for them, at least you could say to them, look, we'll give you 3 more officers, but those are based on funding that has to come from the school district.
That's the key, based
Well-
on funding that has to come.
Well, but
from
at
the
least
budget.
it gives them the
And the school
opportunity, but at
taxes
least
go
it
up.
gives, well, not necessarily, because if we can find grants, and if we can work together to make it work, a grant that works for Monticello and Tri-Valley would also work for Liberty and Roscoe by having other school districts.
Are there any SROs that are grant funded currently?
No, there are not.
All right, so what I think to kind of move this along would be
But
is
thank you for your time. I
if
truly
we could
appreciate
call
it.
the meeting together with Mike and the school superintendents, Josh and Cora as a legislative public safety representative, I'm happy to attend and try to see if we can't pull something together in December here to come
Just
back.
quickly, if I may.
Yes.
I would think if we could do this contractually, you'd avoid a civil service problem by hiring somebody, and then if the school can't fund it, they won't fund it. Just designate it.
Right.
You know, as long as Carolyn can designate that person as an SRO,
Would work.
be tied to the school, which I think
But
is a good way to
if
do it.
Carol designates it as an SRO, just for my information, on that December, Thanksgiving, April, and the other time, if they're released to, would they still have the same responsibilities moving into the other piece?
Yeah, it's a matter of job description. That can be put in the civil service classification.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other public comments? We can get on to Public Works.
County Music, President Sullivan County PVA. Jim put it best, there's not less drunk people driving around, there's just less officers overall. As far as the temporaries, Gene, and we do look early, like the sheriff said, but people that are working part-time in Deer Park and Montgomery want to work for us, they have to work out their schedules to work for us. So we only got 2, we had to get 3 brand new people who've never worked here before. So they also have to be trained. So out of 90 days, they're being trained for a month before they're even let on the road. So they're only getting 60 days out of 90.
So
No.
should we change that to 120 days?
We can't.
It's state law. The civil service law, it's a 90-day window,
Oh, I
period.
see.
But if they're repeaters, they come back every year, the training is the
Well,
same.
Well, you can't guarantee that.
We've only had 2 that have come back for the past 3 years. But next year, one of them will not be coming back because he's getting a full-time job. So he won't be coming back. So
Believe me, if I had the money, I'd like to see 45 at road patrol, or even 50.
in 2008, we were at 45 patrol members. We don't include the chief. He doesn't go on patrol, he doesn't take cases. As of today, we have 35 patrol members. 3 of them are now in the academy. They won't be out until March. They won't be able to help us take their own cases when they're fully trained until the end of 14. With the casinos coming in 2016, we need to be ahead of the game. We need to be proactive instead of reactive. All we're doing now is just catching up with the burglaries, with the drugs, which is creating more victims, longer time to solve crimes.
Response times are longer. It's not as widely publicized as the crack epidemic in the 80s, but there is a heroin and pill epidemic in this county, which is fueling your burglaries, your people driving while ability while impaired. Probably 1 out of 5 cars on the road today, this morning, are driving while ability impaired by drugs. With the increase in overdoses we've seen in this county, probably up 50, 60% from the years before of overdoses, your autopsy budget's gonna have to go up next year. It's just, it's not ending, and with the casinos coming, you're gonna see an increase in these similar issues, and we have a slow response time and not enough people to handle these matters.
That's all understandable. You're putting the cart before the horse. The casino's not here yet. By the time it's built, you're talking 2 to 3 years.
Well, the
You know,
problem
please
exists-
don't use that as an
well, the problem
excuse, that's
exists
all I'm
now
asking.
also. Remove the casinos from the equation, and we do have the problem now
I
of
understand.
lack of manpower.
And that's why I said I would rather see 45 road patrol. But you can't, you know, we're putting the cart before the horse. The casinos aren't here yet. It passed, we're probably gonna get one, whoopee. Let's work on the problem we have now.
Any other public comment? Motion to adjourn?
I need a 5-minute break and I'll. If I need a break,
Jonathan, thank you.